Hello! Today we'll take a tour of the machine. The machine we'll be touring is a 42.5 model of the current generation with an Ergonic 2 remote control and ILS core pump, so the very latest features. We want to show you a few things, what the machine features, the different components, and we want to explain a few things about this. On the right side here, underneath the flap, we have our command center. Here we have our control cabinet and here our receiver for the radio remote control. On the control cabinet we don't have a display. Instead, we have a control console from where we can control different functions. For example, we can switch the lights on and off. We have the flashing lights on the support legs, the support leg lighting, the boom lighting, and if the machine comes with that option, the optional hopper fill level sensors. As you can see, the LED on the button is flashing blue, and if I press it, the green LED starts flashing. This means that the flashing lights on the support legs are switched on and flashing. We also have the radio receiver for the Ergonic 2 control system with the main plug, the aerial plug and the connections here. On top of that, we can see several LEDs. These help with troubleshooting to determine whether there is a radio signal and whether there is power available. It's quite a clever feature. Now, what else? We don't have an additional cable remote control anymore. We only have a radio remote control, but we can operate it with a connecting cable if needed. If we want to do that, we need to disconnect the aerial here. Here we have the cable remote control label. That's where I connect my cable to the radio receiver and the radio remote control turns into a cable remote control. If I want to work with radio again, we need to reconnect the aerial, of course. Also in the box, we have our centralized gauge ports. We can see here two pressure gauges. One pressure gauge has a range of 600 bar. The other pressure gauge has a range of 60 bar. We have a high pressure area and a low pressure area. The high pressure area is marked in red. The low pressure area is marked in green. We can always refer back to the operating instructions if we want to know what each of these mini-mesh connections is intended for. There is an image and designation, for example M1, M6, M4, M3 and so on. What's very important is that we have separate color markings. The 600 bar high pressure area is red and the 60 bar low pressure area is green. If I were to connect the low pressure gauge to the high pressure area, the pressure gauge would spin through and be destroyed, and I would have an oil leak. Another important part on this side is the machine rating plate. The rating plate doesn't have to be on the right side or exactly in this location. It always specifies what kind of machine we have. Here we have a concrete pump and the model in this example is a BSF 42.5 17 ILS. There is also a variety of other data, for example the machine pressures. Here we have our warning plate for the maximum machine noise level. And we also have the engraved machine number directly above the machine rating plate. If the rating plate is lost, you still have the engraved machine number, which you can use to call the Putzmeister service team. The service team can handle the rest and give you all the relevant information for your machine. On this side, we also have our snap lock. On our control cabinet, we have a variety of switches and connectors at the bottom. Let's start with the right switch. This here is the key switch for our ESC system, that is the Ergonic setup control. if there is ever a situation where I would need to set up or work with a machine with a deviation from the horizontal greater than 3 degrees, I would turn the key switch to enter Process Monitoring Mode 1. In PM1, the monitoring for the machine tilt sensor is suppressed. Everything else works normally. Let's say you are working normally and the machine indicates a fault, for example, because a sensor is defective, such as a slewing gear sensor or an angle sensor on arm 1. Then I can also switch over the key switch here and the control system automatically jumps to Process Monitoring Mode 2 or PM2. This means we have a defective sensor, but we can still continue working under certain conditions. The central switch is the local remote switch. Here we have a middle position with 0 and a position to the right where we just came from. If I pull the lever and move it past to the box with an arrow indicating remote control, I will then work with a radio remote control. Or if I move past the 0 to the symbol with a dot indicating local control, it means I'll work with the control panel at the rear on the hopper. But we want to stick with radio remote control. The third thing we have here is a diagnosis port that is very important for service stuff. This is where we connect the service software on our laptops with the machine to service, update or repair it. Now, let's open the control cabinet and take a look inside. We can see a great many cables. I don't want to go into too much detail here, but it is important to me to show you where all the fuses are, just in case a fuse should break. The fuses are here on the left side. We have 3 plug-in boards with a removable cover. This says what the fuse is called and, most importantly, its rating. These here are all 15 amp fuses, and when we look in here, there are 15 amp fuses everywhere, so that's all good. What do I do if I don't know whether the fuse is okay or defective, for example? We have provided for that as well. We have a slot on this side with an indicator LED above it. There is currently a 3 amp fuse in here and the LED is lit up. That means the fuse is not defective. If I remove the 3 amp fuse, the LED goes out. If I put in a defective fuse, the LED stays off. The next thing I want to explain is very close to my heart. It's the reservoir draining system. These containers down here are on every Putzmeister machine. The task we have is to release the water from the hydraulic fluid reservoir, which is why the reservoir draining system is at the lowest point of the hydraulic fluid reservoir. What do I need to do to drain the water? There's a plug here which I need to open. Underneath it there is a threaded union which contains a spring, meaning that if I were to push in the spring, the liquid would emerge. This hose is always screwed into the side. This is the hose that I will screw onto this thread where the plug was. If I screw the threaded union all the way in, the valve opens the check valve and water can emerge. Most people will ask me how often this needs to be done. The operating instructions say it needs to be done daily, meaning the water needs to be drained once a day. Once that's done, we need to return everything to its original position so that nothing can happen. And that's it. Only takes 5 minutes, but it's very important. Now, here we have the operation for the support. We have different levels. According to our concept, these work in two-handed operation because it's a safety function. I always have to actuate the pre-select lever with one hand. With the other hand, I can then operate the required function. It's very important. There's a label for better understanding. It indicates which lever has which functions.
Ein Aufkleber drauf, da steht immer drauf, welcher Hebel welche Funktion auch hat.
With our machines, the way it works is that we always have the pre-select lever forwards in driving direction. Here it also shows a 0 and a 1. Then we have the operation of the individual functions. The first lever, after pre-selection, actuates the support cylinder at the front, allowing me to raise or lower the machine. The second lever moves the rear support leg up and down. The third lever telescopes the forward support leg. The last lever, the fourth one, swings out the rear support leg on the M42. If I want to swing out the rear support leg on the machine, for example, I push the pre-selection lever downwards and then push the last lever upwards. That means the rear support leg swings out. If I want to telescope at the front, for example, I need to push the pre-selection lever downwards and push the third lever upwards. To retract it, simply press the lever downwards. There are two things to note: two-handed operation, safety function. If I'm operating something in the rear, I need to face backwards, and if I'm operating something at the front, I need to look forwards. It's important to never operate several levers at once, since it's not possible to see all the positions at the same time. What else do we have? Lighting is very useful for darker days. We also have our spirit level here with a 3-degree and a 5-degree display for our machine. Up to a maximum of 3 degrees, the machine can be operated safely without issues. We have our emergency shutdown, which can be pressed, turned and unlocked again. We can easily switch off everything if there should be a problem on the machine. Here we are standing at our control panel for local control. This control panel is always located at the rear, right, near the hopper. The control panel is always protected by a mud flap, which I'll lift now. What do we have here? Let me explain briefly. We have another emergency shutdown switch and underneath it the box for delivery nodes. The control panel allows us to operate everything we need for pumping. Straight away we can see a variety of buttons with different symbols and functions and a number of LEDs that light up in different ways. There are 4 LEDs. One red LED, as you can see here. Then we have a green LED. That one isn't currently visible. And then we have an orange LED and a blue one at the far right. Let me briefly explain what that means. Here we have the LEDs that are lit up red. If I press them, nothing happens. That means wherever there is only a red light, there is no function. If I press at the top left here, we have a blue LED. If I press once, the green LED lights up. We can see a small change. We no longer have a red LED at the bottom here, but blue LEDs as well. This means that if only the red LED is lit, I can't activate a function. If only the blue LED is lit, I can activate the function. The horn at the bottom left here has a blue LED. If I press it, you can hear the horn and also see the green LED as feedback while I'm pressing the button. That means the horn is on. What I did in the beginning was to reset the emergency shutdown. Something I also always have to do when I want to start pumping is acknowledging the agitator safety switch on the agitator. Before acknowledging it, I need to walk around the hopper, look into the hopper to make sure that there is nothing inside and that nothing can happen if I activate the function now. Before activating it, the button is red and blue. If I press it now, it lights up green and blue, meaning I could pump now. What we can also see here are flashing LEDs. At the high-pressure water pump, we also have a red LED lit up and a flashing orange LED.
orangene LED.
We have a high-pressure water pump with a water sensor that indicates that we have no water. That's why we can't activate the water pump. If there is water in the tank, the red LED switches to blue and I could then activate the water pump. Here we have our emergency shutdown. We have the pump on, we have our agitator function. Depending on the equipment here, we either have the water box filling or the water box lighting. Here we have the water pump. The agitator safety switch acknowledgement, reverse pumping, agitator reverse, the hopper lubrication. There is an electrical centralized lubrication system for the hopper. If I press here, the lubricant pump runs a lubrication cycle. High pressure water pump, horn, pump stop, hopper lighting. The vibrator, which currently functions even without pumping, this is the function for vibrating free, and our core pump lighting. I want to briefly explain what you can see in the box and what functions the individual components have. Here we have our electrical centralized lubrication system. This lubricant pump is responsible for lubricating the hopper, that is the lubrication points on the hopper, the agitator bearing and the S-transfer tube bearings at the front and rear. It has a defined lubrication interval and lubricates automatically, so there is no need for manual lubrication at the rear. The second large component we have here is the boom control block. This is where all the fluid runs through to the cylinders on the boom and the boom arms move. Here we have an emergency operation device for the boom control. Should the machine fail, which we of course hope it never will, this enables us to still fold the machine safely and properly. Here we have our boom control block. It consists of an input module where the pressure is set. We also have an operating mode selector valve from where I can control whether I operate the boom or the support legs. Very important is a safety valve here, because the two must never function at the same time. If I'm concreting 2 stories up and someone approaches the machine on the ground and wants to move the support. There are also always labels indicating which valve has which function. At Putzmeister, they are always arranged the same way. Here we have our input module and the operating mode selector valve for the boom and support legs. We always continue with the slewing gear, the first arm, the second arm, third arm, fourth arm and fifth arm. If I had a machine with 6 arms, I would have another valve for the 6th arm. At the side here, there are push buttons in the valve. If I press here, I activate the valve and the boom arm moves. That is provided I simultaneously push the operating mode selector valve into the boom position. To make everything a little easier, we have an emergency operation device here with a securing lever which I can pull out to enable. Then I can move the individual valve levers. I can also lock them again. So, if I want to move the second boom arm, for example, I enable it and push the operating mode selector valve to the correct side. That would be the boom side in this case. I'll push this lever so that the button is pushed in and the fluid moves into the section valves. If I want to move the second arm, operating mode selector valve, slewing gear, first arm, second arm. Press here and here. On the side, if I press here, the second arm moves up, and if I press on this side here, the second arm moves down. That's how emergency operation works. We always recommend that two people perform the emergency operation. The problem is that when I'm standing at the valves here, I always have to check how the boom is moving. Eventually, the boom will be in a position where I can't see it. It will be on the other side or just above the flap. That's why you should always have a second person for emergency operation so that the machine can be folded neatly and safely. That's all the information about the boom control block. What else can we see in the flap? There is a safety valve for the support legs. As I mentioned, the control block also contains the operating mode for the support legs. That also includes the emergency operation device for the support legs. I'll unlock the function again, and for the support legs, I would need to push in this button on the side. I also have to enable the emergency valve at the bottom here at the same time. The valve also has an emergency button here. That means I press the emergency valve here and the operating mode selector valve. Then the fluid first runs via the boom control block to the support control blocks. At the support control blocks and the emergency operation device for the support, there always need to be two people. Ensuring the fluid flow alone takes two hands, and then the support control block also needs to be operated for the corresponding support leg function. That also requires two-handed operation, and since no one has four hands, we need two people. A small component at the bottom here is the sensor for the machine tilt. It measures the machine's deviation from the horizontal. Ultimately, the same thing the spirit level at the support control block does, but it does so electronically. Here, we have labels that explain a few more things. For example, which valve operates which boom section, or a special operating mode, which is the emergency supply. For all the details, you can also check the operating instructions. They explain exactly what needs to be done and especially what needs to be observed. Emergency supply means I can connect the machine to another machine or another device, for example the Dynajet 350 Plus. This makes it possible to fold the machine even if the truck engine is defective. To learn how it functions, you can check the label or the operating instructions. Here we also have our snap lock, which is our securing bolt for the support leg. It is also secured with a spring pin in turn, which always needs to be removed for opening or closing it. When you move the support leg, the snap lock is open, of course, and once you reach a permitted position, it automatically snaps shut again. If you see an open snap lock while pumping with the machine, you know that you are not in a permitted support configuration and that it simply isn't safe to pump this way. All of this is also checked electronically with sensors. We also have sensors that check the fit so that we know whether the snap lock is open or closed. That means we also get that feedback on the remote control. Whenever the snap lock is engaged, whether that is during driving or pumping, the securing bolt needs to be secured additionally. Another thing I would like to explain here is this ominous lever. People often ask me, what is it for? So I would like to address it briefly. This is a lever with a Bowden cable and it's labeled with on and off. What sort of function is that? We sometimes receive queries because pipelines for water can freeze and burst down here. That's not something we want, because we'll lose the cleaning water in the water tank. While we do have a closing lever, we still had the problem that the line between the lever and the water tank would stay full of water that could freeze. What did we do? We installed a remote operation device with a shut-off valve controlled via Bowden cable that sits directly on the water tank. We can take a look at how that works. We have a cover here that we can move to the side and take a look inside. When I look inside and move the lever at the same time, we can see how the shut-off valve opens and closes via the Bowden cable. That means I can close the shut-off valve and then open the lever at the bottom again to drain out all the water to make sure that the line doesn't freeze and burst. Here we have our radio remote control, which is the Ergonic 2 radio remote control of the latest generation. I would like to briefly explain the radio remote control. The Ergonic 2 radio remote control is switched on by unlocking the emergency shutdown button on the side. The control system already indicates that the selector switch is not set to 0. The switch always needs to be at 0 when switching on. Then I have the start button. I'll press it once briefly, then let go and press it again for longer. The radio remote control will then switch on, boot up and is ready to go, and immediately gives us the signal that we haven't reset the emergency shutdown. That's the first thing we'll do now. It's the same button we used to switch it on, but this time we'll press it once briefly. Here we have a radio remote control with a display at the top. It also has levers, selector switches and push buttons which come with LED feedback if the function is activated. On the radio remote control, we have everything we really need for pumping represented in the form of a lever or button. That means that I could still operate the entire machine even without the display. I can still pump with the machine. Why? Because I can switch on the pump with these buttons, for example. This here is the pump on push button. I'll press it now and we can immediately see the green LED, meaning the pump is on. It doesn't work now because the machine is off. We immediately get a message on the display saying that we need a higher RPM. I can switch the pump on or off by pressing the button again. I also need the delivery rate for pumping. We have an output controller with a delivery rate from 0 to 10. That means I can decide how fast I want to pump when the pump is on. What else do I need? For setup, I have a selector switch position for the support legs here. Once that's done, I move on to the boom. I can either operate without EBC, or if the machine comes with EBC, that is Ergonic Boom Control, I can go to these red symbols and operate that way. That means I can enable and move the support legs and boom. These control levers here are for moving the boom. I can operate individual boom arms or the coupled functions in EBC. That much on the selector switches. What do we have on the side? On the right side here, we have 4 push buttons each. The top 2 push buttons are for speed regulation and the bottom 2 push buttons are for switching the engine on and off. On the left side we have the horn. The horn is separate from the reset switch. At the very bottom, there is also a button for a lamp integrated at the top here. If I'm wearing the remote control at the front with a strap, the work area in front of me is illuminated so that I can safely select different stages, for example. Let's move on to the joysticks. There are also always explanations on or near the joysticks. Black, green or red. Red always applies if the EBC function is selected, so when you are operating an EBC function. Black and green always show the operation of individual axes on the different boom parts. Naturally, we have several types of boom. We have booms with 3 arms, 4 arms, 5 arms and 6 arms. I can move all arms at the same time by taking the control system and moving the control levers. That is except for when I have 6 arms. In this case, I need to switch over the arm operation on the display from the second to the third arm. A little about the display itself. We have different options here.
Wir haben
Here
hier ein
we have
Maschinenmenü,
a machine
wir haben
menu,
hier ein
a
Reinigungsmenü,
cleaning menu,
ein Eco-Menü.
and an
Und
eco
wenn ich hier
menu.
rein will,
I can press a
drücke ich einfach immer
button
den
to
Knopf
go
und
to
dann bin ich
each
in dem
menu.
jeweiligen Menü. Das
The
Haus heißt
house
immer,
symbol
ich komme
takes
zurück
me
auf mein
back to the home
Home-Menü.
menu.
Das ist unser
That's the
Startbildschirm.
start screen. Then I have
Stützbeine,
screens for the support legs,
Mastfahren,
moving the
Pumpe.
boom,
Also
the
jede
pump.
Betriebsart
Each
hat ihr
operating
eigenes
mode
Menü.
has its
Und
own
wenn ich da
menu,
reingehe,
and
zum
if I
Beispiel
go into the support
Stützbeine,
legs menu,
kann
for
ich in
example,
Untermenüs
I can
gehen
access different
und
submenus.
immer wieder zurück
And the house
auf
symbol
mein Haus,
always
auf mein
takes me
Home-Menü.
back to the home menu. Thank you very much for watching this video. You will find more interesting videos on the Putzmeister YouTube channel.